The autonomic nervous system is one of the nervous systems that we have in our body, and it is responsible for regulating the physiological responses that we have to external stimuli. It's a fascinating place to hang out, and I'm so glad that we're talking about it today. So when we're talking about these physiological responses, these are the automatic things that happen within our bodies. They're the functions that we don't think about, and that's why this is called the autonomic nervous system. So here we're talking about the dilation of pupils or not. We're talking about the contraction or the release of muscles. We're talking about whether or not digestive enzymes are created and released for use. We're talking about respiration, heart rate, circulation to large muscle groups. All of those kinds of things are part of the autonomic nervous system. And this is a really complicated place to be. We're not going to get into all the complicated parts. We're going to keep this very simple because, as usual, we have 15 minutes to talk about this. So I'm going to summarize what this system does and how it functions, and then share a little bit about why this is important for parents to know. How can you use this information when you're looking at things that your child is doing or when you're trying to figure out stuff that you're doing? So the autonomic nervous system has two divisions. There is the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. I think the best way to think about these things is like a light switch. So when one is turned on, the other is turned off. So sympathetic is on, parasympathetic is off. Parasympathetic is on, sympathetic is off. These are not designed to be balanced. They're not designed to both be contributing equally to our bodies at any given time. And that's because they're counterbalancing. If you put these on a scale, they're always going to even out like this. They're never going to land like this. And that's because when one of these is on, the other has to be off. There's some debate about scientifically exactly how this works or how much of one can be on when the other is turned off. We're not going to worry about that. Here's the reason why these two have to be offset like this. This is sympathetic. This is about arousal and stimulation. This is, on the positive side, this is excitement. This is overwhelming joy. This is elation. This is, the happy nerves that you get when you are about to give a speech to a really big audience, or you're getting a promotion, or you're getting married, or having a baby, or any of those happy events in life where you feel in your body, you feel something different. That is your physiological stimulation. That's your arousal state. That comes from the sympathetic nervous system. On the other hand, how we usually think about the sympathetic nervous system is fight or flight. So on the negative side, we can be afraid, we can be angry, we can be frustrated. Those things live here too. And that could be losing a job. It could be getting into an automobile accident, or having a death in the family. All of these things would activate the sympathetic nervous system for the not happy events. And so what we see when the sympathetic nervous system activates, it's receiving some messages from the amygdala, which signals the hypothalamus, which is signaling the sympathetic nervous system. All of these things are related and connected. And this all happens in less than a second, so it's really, really, really fast. But the brain is receiving this information from the outside world, and it's processing it and filtering it and determining, okay, so this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to respond. And so the sympathetic nervous system receives this message and then starts encouraging the other parts of the body to create the physiological response that we have to whatever it is that's happening. So this means that we increase the heart rate, that we increase circulation, but only to specific parts of the body. And this is so important, specific parts of the body. Large muscle groups are going to receive more blood. Digestion, nothing, because digestion is a totally optional process when we are aroused. We can wait and do it later. Likewise, elimination, totally optional process when we're aroused. We can do that later. Being able to fight someone or run away or do, if it's a positive arousal or stimulation, we're still going to have some sort of physical commitment to do. So we need to be ready to do that. And that's why we have more circulation going to the limbs, the large muscle groups in the body. This is also true for the brain, and this is really what I want you to hear, is that the sympathetic nervous system says, okay, so brain, you're going to get more blood, but it's only going to go to this middle part of the brain. So if you remember the handy-dandy brain model, we have the brain stem here, we have the cerebral cortex or the neocortex, whichever you prefer. That's the wrinkly part that's on the outside. And in the middle, we have the limbic system, and that's where we're hanging out with amygdala and hypothalamus. Those are the guys that signal to the sympathetic nervous system that we need to get down and get busy. This is where the increased blood flow goes. It does not go here. And this is the reason why when people are under stress, and it doesn't matter what kind of stress it is, when people are under stress, their thinking is compromised. Their abilities to make decisions, to really look at different options in a rational way, to do any sort of planning that is meaningful and valuable, all of that stuff goes away because the resources to run the brain are being diverted to here, to this middle section where we have intense emotions and we have these really visceral, instinctive responses to things where we are not being rational. We are not rational creatures. This is really important to know. So anybody who is under stress, whether it's happy stress or it's fearful stress, is going to suffer from this. And that is when you are dealing with somebody who is in this state, it's important to remember that rationalizing with that person, explaining things, does not make a rat's ass worth of a difference, because that person just is not physiologically able to process that information. Up here, it's not happening. The resources are not available to do it. That is the most important thing to remember about the sympathetic nervous system. So it's going to take all of those things that we're doing automatically. Excuse me, I have a little something in my throat. And it's going to look at those things and say, okay, this is essential, and this is essential, and this is essential. These things aren't. So colon, you're going to hang on to that poop for a little while. And stomach, you got to keep those contents in there. Don't move them anywhere. We're going to pull all the digestive enzymes because you don't need them right now. So it's effectively shutting off things at the same time that it's turning on things or turning up the volume on things. Now, on the other hand, we have the parasympathetic nervous system. And where this is arousal and stimulation and excitement, this is the opposite. This is calm, relax, rested. This is, we think of this as fight or flight. This is known as rest and digest, or feed and breed. You can choose whichever one you like. So the things that the sympathetic nervous system switches off are things that the parasympathetic nervous system switches on. Those are things that the parasympathetic nervous system specializes in. So things like calming respiration, relaxing the muscles, relaxing vision, being able to digest food and eliminate freely when you need to because you don't feel like you have to hang on to something. There's no feeling that we're going to have to spring into action at a moment's notice, so the muscles are very relaxed and we feel like we could lie down and take a nap or sleep if we need to. And this is a calm, relaxed state. This is the place where we want to be most of the time. Unfortunately, in the culture of the United States, we tend to be over here most of the time, and our bodies are not designed to work that way, which is why we see so many stress-related diseases. We're not built to withstand this for long periods of time. This is meant for very, very short responses. And then we have the parasympathetic nervous system that switches on and says, oh, okay, well, we can take a breather. So if you're looking for a really neat example of how this works, I like to go to wildlife. And so if you've seen a deer on one of those nature channels or programs running for its life because it's being chased by a predator, well, eventually it gets to the place in a happy ending where it reaches a clearing and it looks back and it realizes that it's not under threat anymore. So the sympathetic nervous system in that deer switches off. the parasympathetic nervous system comes on, and what you see is this really interesting whole body twitching of muscles. These large muscle groups are twitching really quickly, and they're releasing all of the extra stress hormones and the trigger hormones that they had to keep them going. And they flush those out. And then the parasympathetic nervous system can come on, and the deer can go back to being in a relaxed and alert state. That's what we see over here. Humans don't know how to do that very well, so we tend to stay over here. But here's where we're going to see increased salivation, we're going to see improved digestion, things like that. This is where we can go to sleep when we feel like it. And in people that are chronically over on this side with the sympathetic nervous system, they do have trouble getting to sleep at night. They may have trouble relaxing. They may have trouble using indoor voices. I don't know if you have that problem at home. I certainly do. Not me specifically, but a young person in my life is a pretty loud guy a lot of the time, and he is just, wow, supercharged, because there's a lot to be excited about at his age. He's 3. So the good news about the parasympathetic nervous system is that it is stronger, infinitely stronger than the sympathetic nervous system. Now that seems kind of funny, but I'll explain this. So the sympathetic nervous system is designed to be lightning fast. Like, it gets the slightest hint that it needs to come on, and it does. And it's instantaneous because it has to be. It's protecting us from threat. It's giving us the ability to respond to things. So it switches on really quickly. Now the parasympathetic nervous system is a bit slower. It's like the defensive guy on the football team. You know, he's massive and he can still move pretty well, but he's slower. He's a heck of a lot stronger though, and when he hits, he has more impact than the offensive guy who's built to just run fast. So this is your offensive guy and this is your defensive guy. He may take a little time to come on, but eventually he's going to plow into this side over here and shut it down really quickly, so you don't have to worry about it. Now, the thing with the parasympathetic nervous system is, though, all of this is supposed to happen automatically. A lot of this has to do with mind being different than brain. So mind can interfere and say, yeah, okay, so we don't really need to do this right now. This is not an emergency. We don't have to be in an arousal state. Let's default to this side. You can make these choices. And in the instances where you feel like you can't make the choices, there are still some things that you can do to turn this on. The reason why it's important to turn this on is because this is where thinking happens. This is where we are rational humans. This is where we are most human. Here, we're not very human. Here, we're predator and prey. We're not very human. Here we can be human. Here we can sit down and we can think about things. We can be rational and logical. We can make decisions. We can make plans. We can have conversations with people without exploding and shouting and calling them names. So this is the place to be. If you're finding that you are talking with somebody who's over here, the first thing to do is to stop talking. Because as we know, that blood flow is going right here to the middle section of the brain. So the only thing that's going to happen is that you're going to increase the arousal state and you want to bring it down. So stop talking. Stop trying to explain things. Instead, just be there. Be there as a calm presence who is not freaking out, right? Now, if it's your own response that you are working through, the trick is, with the parasympathetic nervous system, is to trigger it yourself. So if you feel like it's not coming on and you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm getting stuck in arousal, then you can do some of the things that the parasympathetic nervous system would tell you to do and just make that decision. So you can lie down, thereby telling your body, hey, it's safe enough for me to lie down. There's no obvious threat here. You can sit down, which is a little less powerful, but it's the same idea. It's going to take a little bit longer. You can do things like yawn, which is going to slow down your respiration. You can do deep breathing. That's the thing that people recommend most frequently, and I know that when you're really ramped up, it's hard to do that. And that's why I recommend lying down first, because that's a little bit easier. You can just lie down. Any of these things is going to help send the message to your body that, hey, the threat that we thought was here is not really that threatening. It's safe enough for us to do these things, so maybe we can calm down and taper down. So over time, we want to practice this stuff, and it's going to become more and more automatic. It's going to become more of a pattern and a habit. And we can train our brains to default more to the parasympathetic side than the sympathetic side, as I suspect that that may be the case in your life. And when this happens in a family, when one person is working on this and is defaulting to a calm and relaxed state, other people are going to see this, and it's going to help everybody in the family, even if it doesn't look like it. It's going to help everybody in the family. And eventually those other family members, whether it's your partner or your children, are going to look at what you're doing and really start to study it and say, huh, that seems to be working. It's making a difference. I think I'm going to try that too. So that is the autonomic nervous system. There's so much more that we can talk about with that, and we will do little bits here and there. But that's an introduction, and that's to get you started, and I hope it makes a difference in those brainy brains of yours.